and welcome back to my channel. So today I have another Sims 4 speed build for you, and I feel like this one came out super adorable. I decided that I wanted to make a quaint cabin in the woods, complete with an outhouse. So basically it takes me forever to actually do the outside of the house, but I love the way it came out. I filled the whole lot with a bunch of like plants and trees, a lot of which came from the werewolf pack. So I still used a lot of those pieces because I just felt like that fit really well, and is kind of where I even got the idea for this. And this is the kind of residential, smaller residential lot on the new world that came with the werewolf pack. So this is what New Moon Shack, I believe is what it's called. So I ended up using, like I said, a lot of the stuff from the pack, like a lot of the flooring and the wall coverings, all of that kind of stuff. And I think it came out really well. And I kind of mess around a lot at the very beginning with what I wanted the actual cabin to look like what the aesthetic was going to be. Because I didn't necessarily want it to be like a super like run down like lot with a bunch of trash on it and things like that, which I feel like is what I've done lately with the werewolf pack because it just lends itself so well to it. Like recently I did a werewolf movie theater, which I absolutely loved. But this one I actually wanted it to be like kind of cute, maybe run down because it's older, but not necessarily that like it's just been like trashed, if that makes sense. So I spent a lot of time actually in debug with the werewolf pack, and there are a ton of trees that came with this pack because I wanted to incorporate those so that it looks like it blends into its surroundings. So the trees you see me messing with right now, I wish they had those like separately, if that makes sense. They only have that like cluster. They don't have it as like a single separate tree. I wish that was the case because I would have like placed them like really specifically, but this worked out. I just kind of like went as far as I could to the edge of the lot to where it still filled in really nicely. But yeah, it just kind of, and I think I ended up having to size them down too because I put another cluster of them behind like the main portion of the cabin. And then I also added in a couple other kinds of trees. But some of the trees that came with this pack are humongous. Like, I mean, huge. So, and then I ended up like trying to maybe size some of them down, but then they didn't look quite right. You know, like the texture, it just kind of lost all of its like pretty qualities. So I had to be really specific with what kind of trees I actually used. But I did end up using a lot of the plants too from the pack because I love the plants that came with this pack, but I hate the fact that it's not actually part of the pack. It's part of debug, which is why I spend so much time in debug with this pack. But nonetheless, I'm happy for the items. I will not complain about them. So like I use a new mailbox from the pack as well. And I keep getting a lot of errors with like, it's off the lot because like I said, I was trying to fit everything on here. And then it's so funny. So I'm sitting here trying to actually add a pond and I was like, why is this not working? Like, why can I not like make the ground go down instead of up? Like, what is happening? And I didn't realize I still had the werewolf pack checked. And so the werewolf pack itself didn't come with the ability to do that kind of terrain manipulation. So once I turned that pack off, I then was given the ability to actually adjust the terrain like that and actually create a pond. But it was just kind of funny. I was like, what is going on? But I did add a lot of the pond features, like some ducks, fish, dragonflies, fireflies, just a lot of detail, which was so much fun for this build, which is also why I did it on a smaller lot and not a larger one, because I would have been here forever trying to do this. But it just turned out, I think, so well, just very lush. And I ended up putting in this like kind of dirt stone kind of path from the back door of the house to the outhouse, because I figured that would be the way you'd go. I don't know. That seems more natural to me than doing like going out the front door and going around to the outhouse, I guess, if that makes sense. So I just ended up putting a door in the back. The only windows in this build are the ones here on the front, but there's windows like in the door and the build's not that big, so I think it works out pretty well. And honestly, I feel like this world is kind of dark anyways, like kind of gloomy. So honestly, I don't feel like the windows help all that much with light, if that makes sense. Like in some of the other lots we have in the game, like it makes a huge difference if you don't have windows, but for this one I didn't feel like it made a huge difference. And I liked that they had kind of that like shutter kind of look. And I had our time, like it took me a little bit to find windows that I felt like were appropriate for this, because like I said, I wanted it to look a little bit older, but and not as quite as like pristine, which is also why like I started with these wooden benches, but they looked too perfect, if that makes sense, and I didn't really want that outside since I feel like they would have been there for a while. So I just ended up using the little like tree stump seats that I think came with like Outdoor Retreat, because that, I feel like that pack has good stuff that could work here too, but like I said, a lot of it looks very polished, so it didn't, you know, quite give me the vibe I was looking for. But I ended up just kind of putting like dirt everywhere and just kind of going crazy with all like terrain paint and vegetation and putting a bench outside. And then I ended up putting as well like the lights outside, because I ended up testing the lot. I usually try to do that, like that, to see if the lot would look nice at night as well, because to me that matters. Like if your Sims can be walking around, especially if they have to go outside in order to go to the bathroom, I figured it makes sense if things were lit. And this is actually a pretty large outhouse, I'm not gonna lie, and it is very like packed in terms of like it's got a shower, it's got a bathtub, like it's got even a sink, like it's very nice. But I felt like that worked really well because I wanted to have the like wooden pieces of like the shower and the bathtub, and it just ended up that they were two separate pieces, and I wanted to include both of them because I also think it'd be nice maybe to have like a pet in this build. I didn't include one, but if you did have like a dog or something, you would have to have a bathtub. So I wanted to make sure that was included in case that's something you wanted to have in your gameplay. And this is already on the gallery, so if you would like to download it, please feel free to do so and do whatever you want with it. And of course you can play with it however you want to, whether you add pets or whatever, or end up gutting it and just redoing it, like whatever you want to do. Doesn't hurt my feelings. And I actually ended up putting kind of like a full kitchen in here too, even though it's kind of small. I didn't actually count the tiles, but I feel like it should count as at least like a small home. I don't think necessarily be a tiny home, but you could probably register it that way so that you could get some of the skill building perks and low bills, things like that, if you would like to. I also like had thought about for a moment trying to make it off the grid, but I decided not to. I think it would be pretty easy to make it off the grid if you wanted to. And it also came out to be about 26,000 simoleons. So actually the closest I feel like I've ever come to a starter home. And that's probably because I use so much debug outside instead of like purchasing the stuff and build and buy that comes like in the packs. Otherwise I think this lot would have been much more expensive. And I've never actually used that like plaque of fish like on the wall. I don't think I've ever used that, but we have a ton of them. But I felt like it would be really nice since we have a pond and like a cabin, maybe the person who lives here likes to fish, like that kind of thing. So it felt like it kind of made sense. And it did take me a little while to figure out exactly what I wanted this to look like. And it is kind of studio in the fact that like the bed is with everything else, like there's not like a separate bedroom, but I thought it kind of worked well. And I originally had like the dining space right there, which I liked having it right next to the kitchen, but then I felt like it just kind of limited like the living space I could have, and I wasn't super happy with it. So I moved it over and then thought I'd put a living space over in that corner and then have the bed over there. I'm about to put that in a second. And I was actually thinking about using the werewolf bed for this, but I don't know, this one just spoke to me and I like the colors on it, so that's the one we went with. And I wanted to use those other curtains you saw me like have there for a second, but for some reason they just didn't line up very well and I don't know why. So I was like, it's fine. And I ended up pulling the cottage living dresser in here, and I know that there's a mirror in the bathroom, so you don't really need it necessarily, but I liked the idea of having a dresser, so I included that as well. But I do end up actually flipping the floor plan a little bit and putting the bed on the other side of the house and like putting the living space where the bed is right now, just because I don't know, it just made a little more sense, because I ended up having a lot of empty space in the middle of the house and like trying to cram in like a living space over there as well. But anyways, I think it worked out in the end. And I did end up taking out one of the chairs for the dining space because I figured that makes more sense. Like there's literally only space for one sim right now to sleep, so I figured 2 chairs was enough, like if your person has company over or something like that, and if they had more than just like 2 people can sit on the bed, that kind of thing. And there's also space like in the living room that people could sit, so I figured the amount of space you have in the build, this works just fine. And then I ended up swapping out the plants on that table for some of the like camping stuff, and then I decided like I wanted like this fireplace, but they just ended up being so big. And so I ended up just using this more like this like furnace piece. And I do end up putting a chimney on the build where, like, I guess it doesn't make a whole lot of sense with like the furnace like we've got going here, but I don't know, I felt like it looked nice and kind of matches because we kind of have a fireplace, but I thought this worked a little better because it was smaller with the space we have available. And I did honestly struggle a little bit with how I wanted the seating in this area, because trying to put like a couch or a love seat or something like that was pretty difficult. And you may have seen me just put the stove, like you can see the stove's gone right now. It was doing this thing like move objects has just been weird for me lately. And when I put the pot on top of the stove, it said, no, I don't like it, and deleted it. So I put it back. And then it did the same thing also with like all the corners of this build have like columns. And by the time I finished, like a lot of them were deleted, so I had to go back and put them back in. So I don't know what happened, but Move Objects just got upset and just started deleting stuff. But what I did upload to the gallery does have all of them. So if you download it and they don't, Move Objects just kind of did whatever it want. But I thought it would also be nice, maybe this person did some knitting, like this kind of just made sense to me. And so I put this really nice chair and then like a footstool next to it. And then I just felt like, that was probably pretty good. Like there's, like I said, there's like one sim living here. So, and it felt weird putting a chair like by the door. I kept going back and forth about it, but it just felt kind of weird. I didn't know what to do with the space behind it. So we just actually put a shoe rack there. Like they come in and put their shoes right there. So I think it is just a nice little cabin that maybe you could also use as maybe a vacation home for your Sims. Like your Sim wants to get away and just have some time alone. I did include like a TV in here. So if you do like off the grid or something, you would have to like either generate your own electricity or get rid of it, or it just won't work. Whichever one is totally up to you. And then I do end up adding like a few vines outside as well. Just some like finishing touches. I just like it hit me that I didn't do that. And like I feel like that would be appropriate. So I put some of those in there and just add a little bit more. And I went back and forth about the window boxes, but we had one up top. But we are nearing the end of this video, so if you enjoyed it, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more like it. And if you have any suggestions, leave those down in the comments. I would love to read them. But I hope you have a really sweet day. Bye, everybody.